Hello, everybody. I can't lie. I'm incredibly emotional tonight. Now, a lot of times when I get on here, I'm incredibly emotional. But this is really a big one for me. This is really a big one for me. And, I get emotional because it's not just my history, it's ours. And we're going to celebrate it as you've seen. This is a tribute. This is absolutely a tribute to two legends, who gave a career, incredibly influential. And, that they've given their career so we can have our career. And I thought it was really important to recognize that and to talk about it. And, this channel, it's friends, it's family. And, there was even a fan who had a child, for this channel, celebrating it with this channel. So who do we got tonight? We got the Stigs. We got Meltrident. We got Sporkio. Welcome. And Levizer Soul is in the house tonight. What is going on? He's got no piece of ass standing behind him with the arms crossed, not to watch PWR. I like the way you're doing it. Now, what are we going to cover to celebrate James and Mike and the history that they taught me, and that the moments and the memories that they gave me? And, I want to talk about a lot of different stuff, including the controversy with this Neighbor Nerds program, a lot of speculation, and just the history. And I hope at some point in the show, oh, 1 second, I do have to move something here. But I hope at one point later in the show, maybe about an hour in or so, we want to open up the lines. We want to absolutely open up the lines and hear your history. Did these two men who really were pioneers, influence you? Did you ever go on to create anything sort of from their inspiration? And yeah, I think this is going to be incredible. And I'm just going to talk. I'm emotional, but I'm just going to talk. And the game that I am playing here tonight is, of course, something again that they taught me, that they showed, and I thought was really cool. We're going to be playing some Castlevania 4 while I talk about the history. We got Stone Man in the house saying, fun fact, Mike Matei now franchises 2 McDonald's. Wow. So he's got a mind for business behind the scenes. That's very cool. But let's see what the settings are here. I'm so excited to just talk and to share the history. I don't know if this is going to be the longest one, but I thought it was the right thing to do. In celebrating my career, you can't forget, what inspired you. And these definitely were too. We talked about some of the other inspirations. But I mean, these two gaming minds, absolutely blew the door open for so many of us to be here. And let's just start from the beginning. Who remembers, parents' living room, that family computer. We're talking '07, '08, maybe kind of going into '09, when access to a lot of different content, at this time was still for certain people, certain ages, was still challenging. A lot of us were still relying on that DVD format. Some of us might have been kind of lucky to download things from like a computer and have them to watch, but nothing really changed the game like that YouTube mainstream program did. And I really do remember, first finding Angry Nerd. And, well, thank you for the follow. We do appreciate that. From Civics Libyan, I assume. I appreciate that, brother. And cheers to you guys tonight. But first finding that program, I don't know if you'd call it video series, online video program, whatever you want to call it. And I mean, it was just so groundbreaking because, for one, I think it was still a time where, like, not only seeing our memories, but learning, other people's memories and histories. I remember how cool it was, watching Nerd and seeing all the different cool games that I never heard of, because, and we talk a lot about this generation, these broccoli cuts running around, and, they have access to everything, everything we could imagine, and in seconds. But, even at that time, very early YouTube, some footage and some content was still challenging. It was still valued to come across and to learn about and to share with other people. And I think that's what really struck me going in with that initial Angry Nerd series was, something that meant so much to me growing up. I really was a passionate, from the cradle to the grave gamer. And I was kind of learning, some of the stuff I missed. And because I would say, James and Mike are probably, close to about 8 or so years older than me. I'm not sure their exact ages, but they come from a prior era. And, here they are now sharing their experiences, speaking with a young dude coming up. Now, I gotta admit, it was such a different time. We look back at, like, a lot of media we were consuming, and, we talk about it, the Family Guy, and, a lot of that crap was really hot back then. There was a lot of really shock humor, and, there's nothing wrong with shock humor. But I think back then it was kind of, par for the course in what we expected. So when we, heard the way this nerd spoke, it really kind of, people forget, and if I watch like an Angry Game Nerd episode recently, do I kind of cringe at like the swearing and, the screaming, the F word out and that? Yeah, kind of, yeah. But I mean, back then it was like any authority. It really was that kind of like, screw your parents, like, I'm not going to do what you tell me. I'm going to play games, and if I get pissed off, I'm going to get pissed off. And whether that's telling my parents to screw off, yelling the F word, peeing your pants on the floor, like, it was just such a more anti-authority statement Nerd was when it first came out, and I think that really resonated with a lot of people. And, as the series went on, I was trying to think really hard. When I was laying in bed and I was, enjoying the bedside comfort of James and Mike, reminiscing on my life and, thinking of my choices and thinking of my career, thinking of my career and, where it's going and what I'm thankful for. And I tried to really remember, what was the first nerd, or what was the era of nerd that I first distinctively remember. And I believe it was one of the horror episodes. Like, it might have been the Halloween one. Maybe the Nightmare on Elm Street, maybe. I think it pretty much was the Halloween one. Because how many of us distinctively, remember the trailers posted? The trailers posted. And you had to, all you Gen Z dudes, listen to this, you had to click away from the mainstream video platform and you had to, go to another website and watch the program there. I know it sounds crazy now when you talk about it, but when you say it out loud, it is emotional. And I'm sorry, fans, I'm starting to get emotional. I told myself I could do this tonight, that I wanted to pay tribute, because I feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants tonight. You see the tribute of James and Mike that I put there, watching over my career, watching me play Castlevania, a title which they showed me. Lego Modi says the first one I saw was Ghost and the Goblin episode. Wow. That's I think that was a little ways further, but we all came into it at different eras. But going forward, so anything I could find, any piece of footage, any episode I hadn't seen, with the limited time that I had on the family computer. 1 second here. I would be watching Nerd. I really would be. And I know that sounds ridiculous now, but I think people really forget, how cutting, especially being a gamer coming up in that era. Like, to see video game content, in sort of like a comedy, almost like a TV show-esque presentation, was very groundbreaking. And I think, like many of us, and this is where that other product comes into my life, around this time, because I think many of us, I think Scazo in the audience can agree. Leviser Soul, I'm sure, can agree. What did we do? We watched, every episode we could of Angry Nerd. And then we started typing, in the search bar, like angry video game review, angry, video game review, and I think there's probably so many that we've come across in our times. And just that sort of early 2000s cozy, gritty kind of neckbeardish, game shelf in the back, and you can see the yellowing carpet and like the sunlight kind of peeking through the window at some nondescript bedroom. Like, take us there again, because that's where we are right now. But yes, Leviser Soul does mention Irate Gamer. And you know what? The truth is, I was a fan of him back then. Because, yeah, he was basically a copycat. But it was just like more Angry Nerd, basically, And at that era in my life, I was kind of fine with it. And I like Chris. I really do like Chris. He's given himself to God. he does a lot of work with the paranormal now. He's kind of doing his thing beyond Angry Nerd, but we'll get into that later. I'm just trying to fix my chat box here. Sorry, fans. I just noticed that there now. There we go. Even though the chat is going to cover up James and Mike, we can't have that. So I'll just move it like over here. I have no idea. I'm just going to say screw it for now. I'm just going to keep talking. Keep sharing my history. But anyway, so yeah, like you talk about Irate Gamer, you know, still on there, still doing his thing. But yeah, I found that other product that we speak about. And, you know, people always want to debate like, oh, was I a real fan? Am I a real fan? You know, whatever. But that is the truth, you know, around that kind of 2009-ish, 2010-ish era. Like I was hot for anything that kind of involved comedy, if you want to call it comedy, and gaming. And again, that other product, and a lot of people don't know this, but he, again, had an edge to him back then. Like he really did. You know, he was almost kind of like this sort of like Bam Margera-esque figure in gaming. And I think a lot of people forget that. This is an interesting comment. Somebody says, what about the Hardy Boys being NXT champs? That's incredible. I never heard about it. But yeah, so that's when the passion really started for me with like gaming YouTube. And, you know, there's been some I found over the years. Like a great example of one I found later would be the MJR, you know, who still gets me hot. You know, anytime he does a Radical Reggie game display, God, I get hot. You know, I'm rushing, I'm clicking on the video. So over the years, I've found many, but it really did start with James and Mike. And, you know, I'll just say those three letters openly, and DSP too, as well. And there was like others. People are talking about Keith Apicary. I seen him on the James episode. I know who you're talking about. Jamie says, thank you for carrying the legacy of the old school gamers. Absolutely. You know, I couldn't continue my career, you know, until I gave thanks to like two of the originals, who I believe those two originals that you see that I'm giving thanks for tonight, like have so much I would say they influence like 80% of gamers. You know, which kind of evolved into the streaming, you know, involved into a lot of money going around and, you know, a lot of big high-risk careers. The Hardys are back. The Hardys and the Dudley Boys are back on the stage. I would love to see that. That would be incredible. But anyway, so, you know, I did have the tough upbringing around this time. And I just remember, like, the comfort. Like, what I had at the time was, I had an iPod. I don't remember which one it was. But I think it probably, we're talking 2010. Oh, my goodness. We got a major contribution. And the fans are not just contributing to me. They're contributing to the history, to the legacy. You know, we're going to talk about the good and the bad, you know, which I'm very passionate about. But this is just coming from the heart tonight. So thank you very much from IBS Lurker, who's gifted 5 subs over on the Major Alternative tonight. Matt H is waiting on that Predator Concrete Jungle gameplay. Really? I've never sampled that piece. I've never sampled that piece. But it would be incredible. So anyway, there was a very challenging time, you know, in my life. I wasn't going to school. I was saying screw my parents. I was playing a lot of PS2, PSP. You know, things were challenging, you know, in the household. So from a very early age, I really gave myself, I downloaded every Angry Video Game Nerd episode I could, like at that time, which was probably like 2010, 2011-ish, something like that. And I would just lay in bed, and this is when it all started. I would lay in bed and have the Angry Video Game Nerd episodes on like a iPod, and that was my comfort. That was my escape from the challenging youth. Absolutely. And yeah, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, because when I talk about it and when I share my story, I'm there again. But I'm there again in a positive way, not a negative way that I was back then. I mean, we're talking right at the cusp. PS2 was still hot. PS3 had only been out for maybe a year or so, 2-3 years. And we were aging. The landscape of what we remember in our youth was absolutely already solidified. Talking about the Super Nintendo era, talking about Genesis, N64, going up to, PS1, PS2. It was all solidified. And we were, starting into a new generation now. We did get some gifted subs from Jamie tonight. Jamie, you changed us tonight. And hopefully we're going to do our childhood legends justice tonight with this history that I'm talking about. And I appreciate that, Jamie. And hopefully, like I say, I'm telling your story, as much as I'm telling mine. So anyways, when I was in a really rough point in my life and, school not going good and things not good at home, I really started getting creatively passionate. Now, I've kind of been creative a little bit in my past, playing instruments and stuff. That's pretty much as far as I got to really being creative. But it really was Angry Nerd that inspired me to want to do like some kind of like video-based content. And I never did, because I never really had a great computer or anything like that. It wouldn't be, first death. It wouldn't be until, I don't know, the 2015 or so, until I got to, make my own content, which was that rap music that I played. But it was just so inspiring. Here was this guy, and he had an edge to him, but he played games. His whole character was being a nerd or whatever. And a lot of people now see him as that sort of ho-hum father, type individual. But before then, when he did still have an edge to him, I think a lot of us, who were gamers and, had a bit of an edge to us, with saying, screw you, Mom, I'm not getting off the effing Nintendo. We really resonated with James. And that's kind of what it was for a long time. Now we get into sort of the introduction of Mike Matei, who, as the years went on, I think many of us realized how much of his heart, mind, body, and soul and passion was put in to that initial Angry Video Game Nerd character. How much of Mike really was there in that. And I just remember the first time we kind of got a glimpse of him, they were introducing him as Mother Blanker Mike. And, I was just like, oh, even back then, it's hard to imagine now. But the first thought in my head was, who was this new dude that they were bringing in now? As powerful as it is to hear myself say that about Mike Matei, that was my mindset. Who is this new guy that they're bringing on now? Live It says, "What's up, friend? Well, how are you tonight? Thank you for being here. Thank you for celebrating. Hopefully, we can hear some of your history." Now, we got a very controversial message here from Phobic Crew saying James is a doll being manipulated by whoever in the background is writing the scripts. We'll get into that because I have a lot to say as we get later into the career. But anyway, as far as... I gotta try to keep myself on track here. I'm really just... no script tonight. Just... this is history here. The way I remember it. The way I lived and breathed it. Yeah, I was afraid that the show was going to change, you know, because there was this new dude. But I think at that time it was for the better. I think for a long time the show was still good quality. And I always kept up with it as well. There were like periods where maybe I wasn't really keeping up with it or just kind of was on to other things. But like I'd always come back and I'd always celebrate properly. But by the time I think, now I'm going to get really emotional talking about this, so I do apologize. But I think the real evolution in the channel and in the presentation was, and you heard me talk about it so many times, was the James and Mike Monday that they started doing. And I get emotional because I just think of so many times in my life. It's like flashing before my eyes. You know, how many times I would put those James and Mike Monday videos on for, you know, a bedside comfort. And they were great pieces. You know, I think it was able to show James and Mike from a different angle. More of like a toned down, more personable situation instead of, you know, and I'm going to actually say something very controversial as well coming up. That I just think it was really cool to see both James and Mike a little more like out of a character, you know, just really talking cool games and playing games and, you know, sharing them with us. And the truth is, and it might be controversial to say this, but for me, like if I really want to celebrate James and Mike, I go back to the James and Mike Mondays. I don't go back to the Angry Nerd, like as barely at all. You know, I watched so much of it at one point. Now, you know, getting older now, getting closer to the 40s, you know, I very much preferred the more subdued comfort of the James and Mike Monday, you know, to get me through a hard time or to drift me off to sleep, you know, on a night that I'm tossing and turning. Jamie asked a good question. The current era Mike streams aren't very passionate. Do you think his piece of ass stole his passion for our industry? That could be very true. That could be very true because, you know, she has the career as well. Mike's piece of ass. And I said it, you know, many times. Good for him. He's actually got a pretty solid quality, not half bad looking piece of ass running around. You know, guy talk, or however you want to put it. He's got not a bad piece of ass running around. But as far as has it deterred his passion for gamers? Now, look, I think Mike is definitely someone who has made a life of it and will make a life of it. But, I mean, it just kind of depends. I think it just depends on what he's passionate about. You really think she's like sucking the life energy right out of him? Is that what you're trying to say? But so anyways, I continued to watch the James and Mike, you know, as they were released during that initial run. And it went for quite a long time. I think they finally wrapped it up during the whole COVID era when we went through that major medical controversy. I think that was around the time they ended up wrapping it up. But it was an incredible run. I think it was maybe 2014, 2015, 2016 to about 2021. Around that. I should have looked that up actually before the show. But it was quite a run. Mike was always 10 times more passionate about games than James. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you can tell, how much of the gaming side was really, from Mike. And we'll get into a controversy here. I did want to speak about, because this is just an allegation. There's no court case. There's no criminal filing. But there was an allegation, that back in his earlier years that, Mike was, quite controversial. He did bizarre videos where he was watching Elmo in Grouchland and was making, overtly sexual comments and, glorifying, making an attempt on his biological existence. And I think James was really hot at that because that was one of the first times, a video was, essentially pulled from the channel. And, it was when James was away doing the movie and they kind of gave a bit more of a showcase to Mike's talents. But not only that, his debauchery for that time allegedly went to a further situation where he was I'm trying to think of the appropriate language here. He was promoting the size of his private part openly. And that's all fine and good, if you want to let the people know, your stature, then that's your right. But when you actually go, to replying to fans with a photo of your private, that is a little too far. Now, the thing is, I think people have tried to debunk it and say that either, he just posted like a joke picture or something like that. But he was, hot for that legitimacy that he had, dominance over other men based on the length of his private parts. And the fans were asking for it. The fans were asking for it as well, which people don't really understand. But that was when Mike, first really started having controversies. And I think people started getting their eyes on him a little bit more. There's also a controversy where he was doing like racist Mexican comic books, which I wouldn't say I give a pass on, but it was that era. All you got to do is watch that crap like South Park, and that's kind of what was popular at the time. So I wouldn't say I'd completely excuse it, but I can understand, where it was coming from. But Mike did get a lot of heat from that. He really did, and it came back. But I don't think it really did damage to his career. There were people that took issue with it, people that wanted to speak about it and debate it. Even somebody in the chat mentioned it to me earlier on when I was telling the story. But, oh, 1 second, I'm almost like playing this on autopilot here. Gnar Kill says Mike's publication was worse than South Park. Yes, this is Castlevania 4. This is the game that James and Mike introduced to me. I still like Mike a lot more than James. Yes, I agree. I agree. And that's why I wanted to talk about this. This is why I was so emotional to talk about this was because during the time I was laying in bed, having an emotional episode, what popped up in my subscription feed? James and Mike doing something together again, doing, a Halloween themed video, doing something again. And I think a lot of old school fans were really hot, to see the two together again, to really remember that history and See, it is possible. Maybe we will get it again. Because if you remember, when they stopped the series, they didn't say they were quitting. They said they were going on break. That they were going on break. That the series was going to be taking a break. So, we could still get James and Mike coming back. We don't know. Now, of course, here's where you get into the controversy. We talked about a lot of these young dudes in the back, kind of pulling the strings. This was very much... Yeah, they did do a new video. And there was a lot of controversy because that neighbor nerd John character is missing in action now. So there is definitely a lot of controversy about that, which I'm hoping to speak about here shortly at some point. But yes, we need to learn about the screen wave era, because as much as I really did give my life to Cinemassacre and to James and Mike and the content over the years, there was a period, and I've talked about it before, where I kind of made an attempt to get back into school and, get my GED and do my upgrading and stuff. So that was basically, really challenging. But, James and Mike was still there for me even then. And I started to notice a change now. Now, I first noticed it when they started doing these rental review segments where, there was James, and then sometimes there was Mike there, but then there was these young dudes. And, I think a lot of people felt the same way. Like, who are these young dudes here now that they're bringing in? This guy with the neck beard, denim jacket, this big fat guy, and like people I think thought, these must just be his outside friends, or maybe these are just new people that he's bringing into the career that he thought had talent, that thought had something to say, maybe to the younger demographic that was coming up. James and Mike really were getting into the 30s, the 40s, my apologies, at this point. So, of course, bringing in some young dudes was probably not the worst idea. And they're calling him the Caveman Kieran. Absolutely right. The fans know that the young dudes I'm talking about, I think, tonight. So there was Justin Silverman. There was Kieran, who they call Caveman Kieran. There was this Tony guy, who I had heat with personally, and I can't really remember off the top of my head. There's a lot of throw outs. There was a incredibly embarrassing episode where James and Justin Silverman were reviewing a film with like a Sesame Street puppet, which I think was really one of the low points of the channel right there. Yes, we are going to talk about Newt. We are absolutely going to give justice for Newt tonight, by the way. Yeah, exactly. Like when Jackass brought in that new young crew for the new generation. Exactly. Scazo knows exactly what they were working towards there. But I tried to give it a chance. I really did. Because me, I'm all about, embracing the next generation and, especially in video content. But sometimes I do ask the question. I remember it was strange when I remembered seeing Stuttering Craig actually. With a young dude now on his Game Attack program. And I commented on it and I said, it's really incredible to see a young dude now with Craig, with whatever they were doing, a Twitch stream or whatever. And the guy took offense to that. He was like, oh, what's that supposed to mean? What do you mean young dude now? And I was like, it's just great to see a young dude with Craig here now. But so a lot of the landscape at that time for those older these weren't old guys. We're talking 2015, 16, 17. A lot of our childhood legends from that early YouTube era were bringing in young dudes now to help them navigate the modern product. And that seemed to just be, the case for James. So I tried to give it a chance. I really did. And it was not good, because there was so much stock. I think there was a point, especially when it comes to films and, stuff like that, or other opinions, where what James said, really meant something to certain people. It really did. His perspective on classic films, or, things that he wanted to talk about, really did mean something. But then when you bring these young dudes on and, they're challenging him, they're really putting him in his place. A lot of the time he just seems so out of place and uncomfortable, going back and forth with these young dudes. And I just don't think it put James in a great situation, for content. Now, I want to look at the chat and see, did anybody enjoy the initial edition of any of these young dudes? Some people say they're nostalgic for that era now. An energy drink recommendation? I'd go with the Monster. Diet Monster is really good. That's what I've been drinking recently. Those are really nice. We got Katie the cat here, hopefully to celebrate our history with us. And we have Trank, says PWR, have you ever played Star Force Gemini? Only a little bit. I never really got very far in that game. I always thought it was pretty cool, though. But, the further we got on, troubling things started to emerge about this Justin Silverman. And I had advocated for Justin, in the past, and, came out openly and publicly and said, Justin, it is such a different era now, and I do appreciate you, being the young mind, behind Cinemassacre now. And I really tried to embrace the change. But then there was all this crap coming out about, him doing videos where he aligned himself with very controversial political movements. There was a bizarre connection between this gentleman that was serving time for child-related crimes, which I don't think really indicted him positively to anybody. And I think, again, the Cinemassacre reputation... Oh, damn, bro. The Cinemassacre reputation was, a brand I think you could trust for a long time. That you knew you were getting quality, that you knew you were getting passion. And I think so much of that disappeared, with Justin Silverman and that Screenwave era. I'll never forget, one of the most challenging moments I remember is when, you finally learned, I think many of us did, that he wasn't even doing the scripts anymore. He wasn't doing the gameplay anymore. Everything was sort of being farmed out to third parties. And the moment I noticed it actually was when he did his review of Resident Evil Survivor. The save file says effing Karen on it. And right there, I got hot. And I at that moment, I realized, maybe Cinemassacre, and James as a video producer isn't what it used to be anymore now. I even remember another controversy was when James did What's Bullcrap episode. You seen Karen, holding the phone, walking into the store. I think he was talking about like Halloween decorations or something. It changed from James and Mike to James and this dude. Oh yes, we absolutely are going to be getting into that Neighbor Nerds concept that they did launch. A few years ago now. A few years ago. But as if, you know, bringing these young dudes onto Cinemassacre content wasn't enough. Now we had to learn that they were basically like putting together the whole operation, that they were, you know, basically propping this guy up and giving a younger, and I guess those would be like aging millennials, you know, maybe around the same age as me now. But I mean, compared to James's generation, I do think, you know, it was probably a good business move to try, you know, to get out of that late 80s, early 90s mentality and focus more on like the late 90s, 2000s. So I think it absolutely was a good business decision to bring in some young blood. But I think a lot of that trust was really broken when we're not even watching Angry Nerd anymore. You know, why doesn't Justin just put on the costume and get in front of the camera and do Angry Nerd himself? At that point, that's how I felt. And that's how a lot of fans felt as well. And actually, Narkill 420 brings up a great point. He said James had no time and he had to be done by the 5:40. Now that I do want to speak about. Now, a lot of people who know the history, other Cinemassacre fans who have given their life for that brand, know what he's talking about when he talks about the 5:40. And I actually did watch the situation myself. Oh, it's getting a little tougher here, which consists of, you know, the boys, the men at that time, playing Mega Man X. And as they get close to the end, you can tell James is really getting anxious, getting, you know, really worked up. And he's fighting one of the final bosses or whatever. And, you know, Mike's giving him some tips. He's all sweating and red. And he just stops the game. You know, after he is defeated by the boss, he stops the game. And he looks at the camera and says, you know, I gotta be done. It's 5:40 right now. I gotta be out of here or whatever. And they stop the video. Now, I always thought it was really bizarre how that was worded. And I sort of have a thought on it myself. It really made me think, you know, that his wife probably, you know, wanted him to do something. And he's like, you know, I'm downstairs with Mike today, you know, and she was like, well, I need this done by, you know, 5:30. And he's like, well, come on, you know, can you give me a bit more time? And she's like, probably like 5:40, James. You know, that was like the ultimatum. It sounds like something like your parents would say. That's how I always felt. That's probably what it was. James never had true passion for the games. Even in those James and Mike episodes, I felt he wasn't that into it. Yeah, it kind of depended on what they played. But there are a lot. Oh, thank you, Soulless. There are a lot of James and Mikes where you can just tell he is just looking at the clock, waiting to get out of there. And I actually asked Justin Silverman when he did, you know, the Reddit Ask Me Anything. I said, you know, was there any controversy from Mike, you know, being in the Rolf household down in the basement for hours at a time, yelling F and this? And Justin said he never heard of any such, you know, concern from Mike's language in the basement. But anyway, the series continued. One second, I gotta focus on the boss here. 1 second. No, I didn't think I was gonna make it, man. That was tough, baby. That was tough. So anyway, they continue on, and I think it really becomes obvious that, you know, he just doesn't have the passion anymore. And you know, that happens. You know, the guy was doing it for probably close to 20 years, you know, 15, 10 plus years, whatever it was at that time. And what I think was the real mistake, though, was trying to hide it, you know, trying to still appear that they were involved, that there was a passion for what they were talking about. You can't do the same thing forever. That is a powerful statement. That is a powerful statement. But what really surprised me, I want to talk about, like I said, this is a little off the cuff. I'm kind of trying to go in order. But around this time, what really shocked me too was James actually came forward and called out the haters. And he spoke about, like, the young guys. He's like, you know, you don't say those things about these guys that are trying to help me because I don't have time. Like, James got real. Solus says the new angry video game nerd just don't hit like they used to. I tend to watch about 5 minutes, then I'm out. Mike needs to come back fully into the business. James has passion. No, I agree with you, dude. I don't even watch the new episodes, but if they were, whenever there's a new neighbor nerd with John, I would click right away as soon as I seen it come up. I think if they brought forward that James and Mike concept again, I would be clicking right away. But, you know, for those angry video game nerd episodes, I'm sorry, I'm not clicking as soon as they release anymore. And I'm sure a lot of the fans here feel the same way. But eventually, you know, after all that controversy, they finally, I'm getting really destroyed here. They finally do more or less disappear, you know, which is good. Because I think people just got sick of seeing them. They just didn't accept them. And sure as hell they weren't going to replace James and Mike. No effing way. You know, no way. So they just more or less disappeared. You know, I think Justin actually has fully, you know, transitioned to being behind the camera now. I reached out to him about it before, and I said, you know, Justin, do you have any plans of coming back on camera? And I'm pretty sure he did say that he was a behind-the-scenes guy only now. And actually, we kind of forgot, too, that I wanted to bring up the Irate Gamer Nerd collaboration that we got. And I think, you know, Irate Gamer really got screwed on that deal. You know, it was really only like a cameo. They didn't really do anything together. It really, you know, it could have been big back in that era. But it was too little too late. And I just felt, you know, James just phoned it in. Absolutely phoned it in. But I mean, it was still kind of cool. They did something together. But it was completely phoned in, and it was a game that Nerd already did review. So, Castlevania 4 is the best of them from Blanker 12. Yeah, this is a great game. I just wanted to play it, you know, in tribute to Cinemassacre. While I was talking about the history, while I was talking about our history. And it is coming close to that time that we are going to open up the Discord app and see if anybody else wants to share their history, speak about any controversies, ask me an opinion on any controversy or situation that has come across the Cinemassacre. And then I'll try to transition into, you know, the more modern era. You not a big Mario guy? It would be cool to see you go back and hit Sega Genesis. I barely played any Sega, brother. I barely played any Sega. But I played a little bit on my modded Xbox. And that was about it. I was kind of interested in getting the new Mario Galaxy because I never played that before. So at least for me, it'd be like a new Mario game for the Switch too. But I don't know. Mario just doesn't get me hot anymore. Mario hasn't gotten me hot since Mario World. You know, when I first told my parents, you know, I'm not turning off the effing Nintendo. You know, I still remember the look of shock on my, you know, frail, ailing mother's face. Erin is still bad at gaming. Well, she's not bad to look at. But let's do it. Let's do it now. Before I lose track of what I want to speak openly about. And my Discord is at the top of the screen there. So I will open up the line here for the fans. PWR World Live. You'd secretly respect your child if they told you that they weren't going to turn off the effing Super Nintendo? That's pretty funny. So let's see. We don't have any callers. We don't have any callers. If we don't, I will just continue on speaking openly. Any questions from the live chat about Cinemassacre, you know, to give thanks, James and Mike, or speak about any controversies? PWR, the new Pokemon should get us back to our Switches. It looks really good. I was thinking of getting it. Yes. Just because it's a new Switch 2 release. There is like I guess there's like a Battle Royal 4 versus 4 mode that looks pretty cool. I remember saying, screw my parents, I'm playing GoldenEye. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Imagining your parents as the enemy. Bang, bang, bang. Back in that day, dude, it was anything goes. For N64. Yes, feel free to call in, Levies or Soul. We're talking about Cinemassacre. We're giving thanks to James and Mike. Addressing any controversies or elephants in the room that you might want to speak openly and freely about. Now that's a good question, and that's actually funny. Power Dunk, sorry, not drunk, says, have you played the AVGN games? No, I actually have not. My screw my parents' game was Pokemon Yellow. I love it. That was my era. That was my youth. So great to hear that. I love hearing, you know, other people's histories. Because I think for us of our ages, you know, there were so many good games coming out that, you know, we weren't going to let anything stand in our way. Not school, not church, not parents, not friends in the neighborhood. Did you find the Angry Video Game Nerd a massive disappointment? Yeah, I really did. I remember watching it as soon as, like, I could watch it, which was probably on, like, some website or something. But regardless of how I watched it, I did watch it when it was released. And again, what do I always say? They gave the angry nerd a piece of ass to run after. Which again is bullcrap. Like, why does every character in, you know, movies and TV need a piece of ass now? Like, he never had a piece of ass running around on the original Angry Video Game Nerd show. So we don't have any more callers, so I guess I will continue on speaking openly. So there was this situation. there was this new dude. This young new dude was coming up in the Cinemassacre. And it's kind of been detailed that he was kind of more or less like the whipping boy, or he was the intern kind of character. But people for a while actually did kind of take a liking to him. He definitely knew movies, and if you know Newt, the way that I do, you know that he's very passionate for movies, writes and works on his own pieces of film. Which, good for him, living his dream. And he got absolutely screwed by that piece of crap Tony from Hack the Movies, who kicked his ass to the curb. But he was wrapped up in controversy. He really was wrapped up in controversy when he was found doing plagiarism on the Monster Madness videos. And that really hurt his goodwill with the fans, I believe. And it still, I think, haunts him to this day that he did that. But, he put out forward that, the demands were just so strong. Oh, we did get a super chat here. Let me read that. We got Smitty Weberman Jensen as super chatted $2 and says, never was an angry nerd guy. He liked Doug Walker more. Oh wow, that's powerful. I haven't heard many people say that they like that nostalgia critic brand more than James, what he was doing with Angry Nerds. But okay, where was I? Okay, so we got into that controversy again. That was like another big scandal, that sort of hurt the goodwill. But again, I mean, James's hands. Oh, wow. We got a really scandalous comment here from God of Blank saying Mike and Tony Tuesday got canceled from Tony flirting with Aaron. Oh my God, brother, I would not want to mess with Mr. Matei's piece of ass. Like that, you just don't go there. I always thought, Mike had that edge to him that we don't see on the camera. Like, he can be the gamer, he can be the kind of nerdy, fun-loving guy, but, like behind the camera, like he's going into a fancy restaurant all suited up with the wine pouring and the music and the authentic waiter coming up and saying, how is your mother, Mike? And him saying, good, like a very well-respected man in his community. So if you get messing with his piece of ass, it is not going to be good. We got another super chat from Anode. Has super chatted $10. It says, do you like red letter media? Well, actually, I feel really bad. I appreciate your super chat. So I want to give a shout out to Anode. But I don't know red letter media that you're mentioning. It doesn't ring a bell to me. But anyway, around this time, when the damage had been done, by a lot of these younger dudes, I think they did make the right decision to kind of do away with them eventually. To be honest, for myself, yeah, it's true. I'm kind of nostalgic now for that era. Like I said, that was the time I was like in college. So, I'd be doing homework. And even though I didn't like the younger dudes on the screen wave, I would still have the channel on, playing in the background. Mike should have got with that Super Nintendo girl. I don't know who that is. Skazo says Red Letter Media is great. Maybe I'll check it out. Is it anything like the James and Mike Monday concept? So by this point, James was still taking risks, and Justin and some of the other younger dudes were, still prominently working behind the scenes. This was around the time I think he did that one-shot horror video. I can't remember the game he reviewed, but that was a pretty cool piece that he did. I thought that was very much a passion project. One second, it's really hard to share my passion when the levels are getting so challenging. Oh, it's like a better rental reviews. Okay, I get you. I get you. But I think there was still a lot of demand, for something to happen positively with the channel. The quality was already kind of going down. You took out the young, and then what the hell did they end up doing? Starting an effing band. Now, I have my own opinion on this whole thing because I truly believe that that band, that Rex Viper band that they do, wasn't brought together organically, and I don't think he'll ever come forward about it. But I do think that was very much a Justin Silverman product. I think it was absolutely a Justin Silverman product. I can really imagine James, talking about his dream and passion for a band, and Justin putting in a couple emails and putting the thing together himself, and I don't think he gets enough credit for doing that, for making James's dream come true, which is pretty cool if it is true, because if you remember, Justin was a member of the group doing he was like the hype man, I guess. He was kind of like the mascot of the group. He would do the introductions. And now, is there any fans of his band? I'm not a fan at all. I barely listened to it, but I did watch one or two videos of them and it's basically all just mock, what do you call it, like spoof music, I guess. Nothing original, nothing powerful or original. It's just like, I'm sure if you were at some event or something and you could see it, you'd probably go. You want a Justin solo project? That would be pretty cool. I gotta admit it, a Justin solo project. I'm surprised that he didn't take the clout that he got from, being the young dude behind Cinemassacre and branching that out to his own career. But for whatever reason, he decided to go, fully behind the camera. Yes, I did watch that video last night. It was pretty impressive for sure. Yeah, I did watch that. So thank you for your recommendation, Dark Wind. You're screwing me up on the Castlevania, but it's all good. But anyways, today, so there were times, within the past few years where I really was struggling. I was under the roof of the ailing mother. My whole life was falling apart, but who was still there for me? Absolutely James and Mike, among like some other creators, were there for me still, 15 years later. I could still find so much comfort in watching James and Mike or watching the classic Cinemassacre content. And I'm very thankful. But I always wanted the James and Mike concepts to return. I really did. And I hoped that it would. They never really announced it ending. They said they were going to take a break. But what did they do instead? They brought in another dude. Now, I don't know if I could call him a young dude. But they went with, and I've spoken about it many times, but they went with that neighbor nerd concept. Which, I mean, is very interesting because the whole idea of it was, let's take, James's childhood neighbor. Put him, with James doing the gaming content. And it just didn't, I personally, I was hot for it. Now, I really was. Of course, I was asking this question, who is this John dude? But it only took an episode or two where I was really, celebrating. And I really thought he had, a zest for life that was missing from James and, missing from so much of the content. And he really, put James in his place. If you guys remember on the Monopoly review, he put him in his place about his hairline, and asked him when he was going to shave the hairline off. And James never really had been challenged like that. I think he was by Mike at one time. Um, Whoa, hold on a second. This is getting super intense. And I want to make sure I get my thoughts on John across. But I absolutely think he could have launched a solo career. Now, I don't know if he was personally interested in doing any kind of content or... but he was showing James newer releases, showing James Overwatch, among other cool modern games. I really enjoyed when they did the Super Mario World, and they showed clips from John and James in their younger years, you know, playing Super Nintendo. The water spit looks really cool. Why are you liking this game? Hopefully you guys like it. Like I said, this isn't going to be too long tonight. I just wanted to really celebrate. And there was no way I could continue at this career without thanking two of the ones who allowed me to do this. Yes, we're talking about the Mortal Kombat hat. That actually the hat I'm wearing tonight is supposed to be a tribute to that iconic Mortal Kombat crushed hat. But that's why I wanted to do this, because even though his content isn't what it used to be, maybe if he isn't as relevant now as he used to be, he can still give us comfort, damn it. I think he can still, you know, both of them, James and Mike, can still give us comfort in troubling times. And for me personally, I mean, I don't know what content does that for you guys, but James and Mike absolutely do that. And that's why I'm playing this Castlevania right now and just imagining, you know, James and Mike looking down and just, you know, being thankful that they reached me, that they taught me, you know, this industry and, you know, making sacrifices and to be passionate. But sometimes when you can't find that, you can look forward in your history. You can look forward in your past. And fans, that's going to be it for this stream. I'm becoming really emotional. This was going to be a shorter stream. Now, I do have a surprise for tomorrow. For Friday night, we're going to be playing something really hot. So you're going to want to stay tuned. But I had to do a celebration. You know, I had to do a celebration. And I'm glad you guys came here and checked it out with me. And we're here to listen. You know, I think tonight, even once I get off the stream, I might go in my bed and put James and Mike Monday on. Eventually, you know, I do have to move forward. You know, I do have to move forward. But for this challenging time in my life, I'm going to be thankful for everything that they gave to us. And this stream was in dedication to them. To us original dudes who were there when it all started. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow for a very special, hot Halloween themed